Hi, welcome to my summer camp video series. My name is Aaron, and throughout this week I'm going to be taking you up through a lot of cool, fun little science experiments that you can do and follow along at home. I'm going to be showing you how to do the experiment and how they work and what's really happening. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, I'm going to be teaching you and learning out how all these things connect to our relationships in our life and also relationships that we have with God. Today, though, we're going to be focusing on Oobleck. Oobleck is this really cool substance that can act like a solid and act like a liquid all at the exact same time.
As you can see, the more we play with it and move it around, it becomes solid and it acts like solid. But as soon as I stop, it slowly just starts to melt away in my hands. This is because Oobleck is a non-Newtonian fluid. Basically what that means is that it doesn't act like a liquid and it doesn't really act like a solid. It's somewhere in between. As you can see, when the spoon is being pulled through, it it shows resistance. It looks like a solid, but then it just slowly melts away. Another way of showing this is how when you hit it with a spoon, the spoon sort of bounces back off the surface. But when you just lightly put the spoon into the bowl, into the oobleck, it just melts away. So now you're probably wondering how to make it. What you're going to need is 1 cup of cornstarch, and you're going to need half a cup of water. And you can use measuring cups to measure both these out. You're going to need a large bowl for the oobleck to go in, and if you want, you can use a spoon to mix the two things together. Now that we have our ingredients for our oobleck, we're going to start making our oobleck. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your large bowl and you're going to want to dump in your 1 cup of cornstarch. Now what you're going to do, that you've done that and make sure all the cornstarch gets into the bowl, is you're going to get your water and you're just going to slowly pour in your water a little bit at a time. This is just so you can make sure that your oobleck turns out to be the right consistency that you want, and so it's not too much like a liquid or too much like a solid. And so once you pour in a little bit of water, you're just going to take your spoon, or you can use your hands if you want, and you're gonna mix it all together. And once all the water is gone and has been absorbed by the cornstarch, you can add a little bit more water. It's important that if you're going to start seeing all these large clumps, and what you're going to do is you're just going to want to break them up, use the back of your spoon or just use your hands, pick them up and just break them apart. And so now we're going to add more water, and we're just going to continue to repeat this process until we have the right consistency of oobleck. When you get to this point, you start to see the cornstarch turn to a bit of a liquid and not look like a powder anymore. That's when you know you're really close to having oobleck. So at this point, it's really important that you start to slowly add more water. Also at this point, you'll probably want to start using your hands as it'll become really tough to be mixing around with a spoon. What we're looking for in the end is for the oobleck to just sort of melt away when it's not being touched, but it's being able to pick up, and when you play around with it in your hands, it'll hold its shape for a little bit. And if it becomes too liquidy, that's okay. You can always add a little bit more cornstarch. The more cornstarch you add, the more it'll be able to hold its shape, and the harder it'll be to melt away. And the more water you add, the more liquidy it will add. And so you always want to make sure that you're getting somewhere in between to get oobleck. Now, while I'm just finished making up the oobleck, I'm going to talk to you about the Bible. So this connects to the Bible because we're talking about how we need to make our relationships strong. And to do that, we need to work at them, and we need to constantly be working at them. And we can do this by loving other people. But it's hard to know what that looks like. And so for us, we can look at James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. And it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." So what this is telling us is that we need to be slow to anger and we need to listen, because when we listen, that's how we can gain understanding and how we can grow those relationships and how those relationships can become stronger. Now that you've created your Oobleck, you can add food coloring to make it any cool funky color that you want. For me, I chose green because green's my favorite color. The more food dye you add, the darker it's going to be. And if you use food dye, be careful when you're playing with it, as it will dye your hands, but it'll should wash out. And yeah, so what you want to do is there's a couple of ways. You can just play around with the Oobleck until it's worked in. I would recommend that you just kind of swirl it around your bowl first. Yeah, and if you like the color, you can stop, or if you want to make it darker or change the color, you can add more food dye. Also, another possibility is if you want multiple colors, you can separate them into two different bowls and then add the food dye to each bowl. Now that you've finished your Oobleck, you can try cool different things you want, see how it'll react, and see what things will happen. One of the cool things about Oobleck is that it has a very high viscosity. And basically what that means is that it flows really slowly. So as you can see as I'm pouring out this Oobleck into more Oobleck, it's very slow and just kind of coming out in chunks. That's one of the reasons um, that's why it has such a high viscosity. Yeah, and it's one of the cool things about Oobleck. One of the things that I wanted to test was to see what would happen if you tried to bounce a ball off of Oobleck. So that's what I did. In this here, you can see that the ball is bouncing straight back up. It's having no problems bouncing back up, just as if it was bouncing off the floor. And if you look closely, you can see that there's little ripples coming out where the ball is landing, just like if it was a liquid. And it's really cool because if you just place the ball, though, it starts to slowly sink into the Oobleck until it reaches the bottom. And when you pull the ball out, it leaves this indent, like again, like a solid, but it fills back in, just like how a liquid would. And just to compare this, I also dropped the ball in some water to see what the difference would be. And as you can see, as soon as the ball hits the water, it doesn't bounce up. It doesn't have time, it doesn't have enough energy. And this is because the water moves out of the way of the ball and allows the ball to sink to the ground. Whereas when it bounces against the Oobleck or a solid ground, the ball is able to compress and then bounce right back up.
So I hope you've enjoyed making Oobleck with me today. It's been a lot of fun learning about all the cool properties that it has. But do you know why we made this today, though? The reason is that Oobleck represents a lot like our relationships. When we work with them and we put a lot of work and effort into them, our relationships grow stronger and they are able to hold a lot more. But when we stop working on our relationships, they start to melt away and they become a lot weaker. This is just like our relationship with God. The more effort and time we put into it, the stronger our relationship with God becomes. But when we don't, it starts to melt away. And it's really important that we continue to grow our relationship with God. And it's very important that we do it every single day. So, what are things that you can do to grow your relationship with God and grow the relationship with the people around you? I really do hope that you enjoyed making Oobleck with me today. And I hope to see you tomorrow when we make bubble bombs.